All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Plug and Pay, a talk show where we talk with payroll professionals from all around the world about interesting, thought-provoking topics that are shaping the global payroll space. My name is Mark Oliver Fiedler. I'm the founder and CEO of Payzaar. I'm also the host of this show. We release new episodes of Plug and Pay every month, and you can find them on our LinkedIn page, on our YouTube channel, as well as any of the major podcast sites where you find your podcasts. If you like the content that we're creating, please make sure you subscribe to our channels. You give us a like or leave a comment. That's very important so we can make sure we spread the word and get this content out to as many people as possible. So for today's episode, we have something a little bit special in store. If you've watched our program here in the past, you would have seen that usually I have people on the program that are working at external organizations, other organizations in the industry. For today's episode, we actually have someone of our very own from Payzaar on the program, which is none other than my good friend and co-founder, Trevor Townsend. Trevor, welcome to the show. It's great to be able to talk to you in this little format here.
Yeah, no, it's great. To be honest, I don't know how I managed to get on the show other than I had to bribe Sam an extensive amount of money, some holiday, and I think it was a new car to actually get a guest appearance on here today. But look, that's between myself and Sam.
Listen, that's great to hear. We'll cut this part out for sure, so we don't disclose too many insider secrets here. But well, listen. You and I obviously met a number of years ago, and we've been growing this business together. We met at a little company called ADP, and that's kind of where the idea for Payzaar started to take shape. But given your experience, having worked in the space for quite some time, we thought it'd be great to have you on and share a bit your perspective about what's happening in the industry and in the space. Before we jump into the topic for today, which is really taking a bit of a tour of the industry from a technology perspective, what's happening from the technology trends. I think it would be great if you tell us a bit about yourself to start with.
Sure. So as you mentioned, started the business with Mark, met Mark at ADP a number of years ago. And my role here at Payzaar, I'm responsible for product technology and a number of other things. And really enjoy working in the space. How I got into payroll, like lots of other people, I kind of stumbled into it. I was writing code for an investment company in Ireland. Moved to a HR technology company called One Click HR and started to develop HR systems there. And naturally that kind of took us into the periphery of payroll, because HR systems, as you know, store some of the data that we need to help get people paid. And that company, we had a platform called HR.net, and we were acquired by ADP. And this is, I suppose, a post-acquisition. I stayed at ADP and was responsible for product and strategy, including the international offering for ADP UK, and that's where I met Mark. So, when I was a kid, did I have on my wish list working in the payroll industry, like most other people know. So came into it sideways.
You got lucky, we would say, right? You found your way into a great little industry. Obviously you have a very, very, strong background, deep background, especially on the technology side of things, of the industry. And hence for today's session, that's really the theme that we want to talk about. And to get us started on this, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on what are some of the big trends, some of the big themes that we're currently seeing, that we're going through in the payroll world.
Sure. Well, I suppose over the last number of years, there's been a lot of hype around a number of different kind of new technologies and innovations. But I think that an awful lot of it is kind of marketing. So I'm going to divide them into two kind of sections. One is trends that we've seen implemented at scale, and then new emerging technologies that I think we should be excited about, but we need to see where the journey takes those and how we can apply them in a payroll context. So for me, I think the biggest one that's hit the payroll industry in the last number of years is around cloud first and SaaS applications. And what that allows us to do is to deliver applications that are always available, highly resilient, available in the cloud, secure, that people in a global payroll context can access from anywhere, wherever they are. So cloud has been a major step forward over the last number of years. And true SaaS applications, so software as a service applications then that reside in the cloud, are applications that have characteristics like configuration over customization. It means they're easy to maintain and upgrade. They're self-serviceable. They tend to have a lower cost of ownership for the end users over time, and avoid things like high amounts of custom code and high amounts of customization that make maintenance of those applications and make upgrading those applications very, very difficult. So there's definitely the coalescence of true SaaS applications for payroll that are resident in the cloud. I think another big trend that's been implemented at some degree of scale is around analytics. Now, organizations are generating vast volumes of data, and in fact, they're actually swamped by this data, and then they need to figure out what to do with it. And often there's reliability issues. And one of the great things about payroll is that we can actually trust the insights that you can derive from payroll, because the payroll data is incredibly accurate. But some of the challenges that international organizations have is pulling it all together so it's all commonly understood. They have a schema that they can, I suppose, just apply their own kind of interpretation of the data to meet what the organization means based on a commonly understood format for that data. So we're seeing some of those services coming through now that make it really easy in a SaaS environment. So back to that configuration team, back to that self-service team of delivering applications in the cloud. Analytics, I think, is bringing cloud and bringing those SaaS characteristics together to deliver better applications and services for customers. When I then think about things like automation, like a number of years ago, robotic process automation was seen as the hammer for every single nail out there. If I had a business problem, what did I want to do? I wanted to get an RPA solution in. I wanted to RPA the whole organization. I could lean out the organization, and I only needed the operators of the RPA system to run my whole business at the click of a button.
Payroll robots. Do we have payroll robots today?
But, well, there are some we might talk about. We might talk about those, but like any technology, there's been as many successful as failed business cases around robotic process automation. Definitely has a role. Definitely, there are use cases where they come into their own in a fantastic way, and we bounce off them all of the time in our daily lives when we interact with services from banking customers or contact centers. And they do a good job, but they don't do every job. Now, what we are seeing is, I suppose, the emergence of tools like ChatGPT, which kind of, for me at the moment, feels a little bit like the hype cycle around robotic process automation from a little while ago. Because again, I think people are, it's a new technology, people are learning about it, but there are concerns about it. Like today, on the BBC news site, there's a big issue around information security and data leaks from ChatGPT, which, on one hand, we need to see the maturity of these new innovations so that we don't expose the organization to data breach. So I think in our context, in the payroll context, when we're handling we're handling personal data, we're handling sensitive information that we need to protect. On one hand, we need to be excited about some innovations like ChatGPT and think about how can we apply them in a way in which we can make the working lives of people in both payroll, the consumers of payroll, the employee, and the organization better for harnessing those new technologies. At the same time, we need to be very conscious that there's an information security organization, data protection officers within the organization that have to sign off on these applications too. So we need to see some maturity, I think, around how do we apply tools like ChatGPT, and once we apply them, how can we apply them safely so that we know information is secure? So we have these kind of competing interests all of the time when we're looking at innovation, where people like me will get really excited about how can we do X, Y, and Z, and spin up teams that'll want to test and try some applications of ChatGPT for our customers. But at the same time, the maturity around how do we protect that information? How is it always safe, secure, available, performant? So, we just need to see some maturity around that. And I'm sure there will be some great applications that'll come out from it. And I hope we'll be part of that. But then we just need to be conscious that it'll need to get through information security due diligence at customer organizations. API and connectivity is another huge theme. And if I think about anyone I talk to, peers in the industry, leaders leading other technology companies, everything is API. And I think that makes an awful lot of sense. Because we just need interoperability of systems in the client's operating environments, simple as that, but it's not as simple as that. Because when I think about, the hope, and I get this during some of our kind of sales discussions where I might come in to represent the technology side of Payzaar, we'll say, well, have you got an API for this and have you got an API for that? And, we get into conversations with customers around the sources of their data. And in fact, we're in an ecosystem where we need several APIs available from source systems that customers have, pointing at several APIs that largely don't exist for payroll vendors that they also have. And we will undoubtedly see API everywhere. But I think that's one of the ones that I think is on the maturity curve. It's further down the track than ChatGPT, but I think for our industry, there's work to be done there. And one, I suppose, area, and I've kind of touched on it as well in terms of a trend that's impacting, I think, pretty much every technology vendor, is around what I would call some of the non-functional attributes of technology. So things like availability, performance, resilience, but most especially security. Security, like the emphasis on security over the last number of years has just shot through the roof. Like a lot of it has been pushed through by data protection legislation, in Europe, especially GDPR, and potentially the fines of data breaches. And we've seen some colossal fines handed out to some of the very large tech companies by data commissioners in different countries within the European Union. And that for me is one of those kind of technology trends that, we need to think security first when we're developing any new feature or any new platform. And, on one hand, what you want to do is you want to solve the business problems for your customers, but then we always need to be paying attention to say, we can solve that business problem with this new piece of technology, this new module, this new feature. But before we even start cutting code on any of that stuff, we need to make sure that the security model around it is tight. And that, to me, is this kind of combination of kind of new technologies we can take advantage of, but also pressures then coming from maybe outside of the payroll domain specialist who wants to solve a problem, to say, if you want to deploy that application in our system, in our environment, if you want to put our employees' data on there, you got to find vendors that go through very stringent information security due diligence and are good at it. So for me, Mark, these are kind of the things that over the last number of years would they're trends at different levels of maturity and adoption. And I'm sure we're going to see some very exciting things coming up as well.
Yeah. So it's great list of things that you've described that are going on. And thinking about these, then I guess the next question in my mind then would be, how does that impact the payroll professional in their day-to-day job, in their role? All these different things that are, as you said, in some cases already quite mature and broadly available. In other cases, probably still a bit exploratory. How should a payroll professional kind of think about the impact on their job that they're doing?
I kind of like to think of technology as you think of technology as something you want to recruit to do a job for you. So you're hiring the technology to do a job. And what are the things that, when I think of our customers today and the users of our system, I'm thinking about like what way can we impact their working lives to improve their working environments for the teams. And then you got to really get into, how are these folks working on a day-to-day basis? What are the kind of tasks that they do that are urgent, important, high volume, and maybe sometimes a little bit monotonous around manually pulling data together. There's an awful lot of this going on in our industry today, Mark, where customers under the gun of payroll cutoff are manually manipulating data from lots of different data sources. When that data then gets sent to payroll for processing, then checking what comes back against the instructions, there's again an awful lot of manual checking there. And because a lot of this, we're combining data often very manual fashion, of course errors are going to sneak in, right? And that generates flack and it generates heat for the payroll team because, guess what? The benchmark is always right 100% of the time and on time, all of the time, right? So things get noisy. So for me, I think when we're thinking about technology and how we can impact the payroll professional, we should really be looking at tasks that you say, how can we drive high degrees of automation while at the same time driving extremely high degrees of accuracy? So we take away a lot of this manual data manipulation. We take away an awful lot of this manual data checking to make sure payroll is right. And tools exist like ours that help customers to do that. So for me, technology should really impact the working lives of people in the payroll team and make it just make it better. And if we do that, then I often think about, this discussion around payroll and the seat at the table and what have you. And I think there's a way in which payroll can have way more influence in the organization. So if we get through step one, we free up the payroll team of lots of this kind of manually manipulating data through tools that our team would develop and all of that checking. Now maybe I have a little bit of time to get involved in more influencing role in the organization. And what I want to describe next is maybe the finance function a little bit. So I often wonder how the finance function in an organization is so powerful, right? Organizations are often described as finance-led sales organizations or sales-led finance organizations, right? Two most powerful business units in the organization. And finance, don't get me wrong, do a great job, right? But for me, as kind of with more of an innovation, more of a development type kind of view of the world, I kind of look at finance counting things that have already happened. A lot of their time is in the rear view, just producing accounts, analyzing what's happened last month, last year, comparing this quarter to last quarter, doing very valuable things like cost containment, keeping the organization on the rails. But the reason they're so influential in the organization is because they're custodians of important data, right? But if I then think about how payroll could be more influential, like payroll sits on about 70% of the data that impacts the company's cost base, so staff, right? So if I can free up time from all of this kind of manual type work around all this data knifing and forking, and if I have tools to pull together that data, which they are now available, to pull that data together in a self-serviceable, easy type format, maybe now I can start to become more influential in providing insight out to the organization in a reliable type fashion. And that, to me, puts the payroll team in a way more influential position. So I think technology can really help payroll boost their influence in the organization, boost their profile in the organization, and and need maybe to more interesting work and expansions of role for payroll professionals. And then I think about choice, and I think about technology enabling newer ways of going about global payroll. So, like in the old days, we had kind of traditional aggregation models where you went to one company, they took payroll from that company, ripped and replaced your existing payroll landscape to get to this kind of centralized type value. And listen, that model it's great. It works for certain organizations, don't get me wrong. But today now I have more choice as well. I've choice to say, how can I get to kind of things that are really important if I'm trying to get control of my global payroll landscape around automation, process standardization, data analytics, these kind of themes that will help me deliver that value into the organization. So for me, those are kind of the three things that how technology will help. It'll automation to reduce an awful lot of that manual data manipulation. Influence through leveraging the data. And then I have choices now in terms of how do I go to get my arms around and control my global payroll landscape.
Mm-hmm. Great perspectives for the payroll professionals. Now, the other party, obviously, in this picture is the end customer, so to speak, the employees, right? And curious to get your thoughts on all this improvement in technology. What should employees anticipate? How that's going to change their payroll experience, today and in the future?
Again, if I think about the employee, Mark, what do they expect from payroll, right, as the end customers? And I think at a very basic level,
needs to be correct, right?
Yeah, I get paid what I expect. I get paid when I expect it, and I understand how I've been paid, right? And if I've some queries about that they are responded to, so they're kind of basic level, I would say, satisfier type needs that the employee has of the payroll team, and 95% of the employees will kind of go, okay, I'm paid and that's fine. But there's still a fair chunk of employees out there receiving pay slips that are unintelligible. They're receiving them in paper format. They may be emailed to them and what have you, and they're not particularly dynamic. And I think there's things that we can do around that to deliver a better service to those end employees, for example, just to drive up education around how they've been paid and drive that understandability. And this could be a use case, for example, for ChatGPT to say, well, look, if I'm in France and I have 3 pages of payroll terminology that appears on my payslip, that maybe that helps decipher things like that and be responsive and be available to when the employee has those questions as well, without necessarily the payroll team being available 24/7. So I think there's some opportunities around that that would certainly, I think, improve what the ultimate customer of payroll would want. Now, I know there's been a lot of discussion in the last while about on-demand payroll, and that's certainly a hot topic. And on one hand, I really like the flexibility that offers to say, pay me when I want to be paid. On the other hand, I am concerned for those employees and their financial wellness, right? So, there have been the payday loan type providers out there that hopefully pay on demand helps the employee to avoid those kind of situations. But at the same time, you gotta be concerned for your colleague that can't make it to payday at the end of the week or the end of the month. or halfway through the month that they need to draw payroll on demand. So on one hand, I think choice is a good thing. On the other hand, I would have some concerns for colleagues in that situation. Obviously, better than a payday loan. So for me, I think there are ways in which there's some changes, some trends in this area as well that will be interesting to see how they pan out over the coming years.
Okay, excellent. Now, look, you obviously spend a lot of time talking to clients, prospects, providers, industry analysts, and so on. So I'm curious, what's your view of the current payroll vendor or technology landscape, and where do you think it's going, and kind of what is it going to look like mid to longer term as we're kind of going through this?
Yeah, like we would be out in the industry talking to different participants in the industry, from customers to investors to private equity firms that have an interest in understanding how the market is intermediated and put together. We're seeing, because we're involved in kind of global and we have strong relationships with local in-country payroll providers, we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry. In fact, we're seeing a lot of acquisitions of in-country payroll providers, like best of breed in-country payroll providers, being picked off by your larger global payroll companies. So lots of consolidation, I think, in the industry, which, if we think about that in a way, may reduce choice for customers in the end. And that's never a great position. But like that's certainly a big trend I'm seeing. We've also seen the last while, in terms of additional market participants, like PEO organizations that have moved in, and the pandemic really has been a huge catalyst for that, as staff at that time dispersed around the world, and organizations suddenly found themselves with a bunch of employees, in countries where they'd no presence, they'd no branch, they'd no sub, and now they had to figure out how do we get these folks paid without generating big issues from a social security and taxation perspective for both the employer and the employee. So it'll be interesting to see how this big influx of new PEO operators, like deals, remotes, etc., how they will settle into this market, because they are making some noise about payroll and offering global payroll as part of their service. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of maybe move up the value chain a little bit. I think that'll be an interesting space to watch. And then, of course, if I talk about a new segment from a global payroll perspective, would be the open platform segment, where there are some new participants like Payzaar who are saying, look, there's a new way to do global payroll. If you want, fast time to value, you want SaaS-based applications, you want data analytics, you want automation without big upheaval in the organization, and at a pace that maybe a traditional global payroll project couldn't deliver. There's new platforms that are now starting to enable that. So there's some of the kind of the macro trends I would see that are, some of them influenced by technology, some of them influenced by market dynamics, and other mega trends like the move to remoteness, that are giving rise to an influx of PEO operators, for example, that I think are impacting the industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So speaking of trends, we've talked about trends that are, in different maturity stages. Are there any kind of hot topics, hot things that are being talked about that you think, from your personal perspective, that will flop, that are not going to take off? And if so, why?
Yeah, I'm positive that some of the innovation we're seeing will find its place somewhere in the overall payroll service delivery, but we might not necessarily be apparent today what that will be, right? And I'll give you an example. the first call made from a cell phone was made in 1973, right? It took a long time for, cell phones to turn into smartphones, to turn into 99.9% penetration of the adult population, right? So innovation happens, and you can see jumps, you can see it bumble along in terms of adoption and trying to find its place, and then all of a sudden, bang, something happens. There's an inflection point, and next thing you know, everyone is walking around with a phone in their pocket. Same thing happened with PCs. Like I think the first PC was released in like the 1970s, but it took till the late 1980s, early 1990s before they started to penetrate businesses and home as well. So, so for me, I think we're finding, these things will find a groove, right? So for me, if I was to think about ChatGPT, it will certainly find a place. I think we just need to see maturity. And I think on one hand, you'll have innovation and a clamor to take advantage of those type of technologies and a desire to do that. And I think a lot of vendors will want to be seen to be on that path. But at the same time, when you look at the BBC site today and you're talking about, data leakage out of ChatGPT, that's going to raise massive concerns for the organization. Now, we're in business to business type software development, and it's a reasonably conservative type market. It's not like you're launching something to the consumer where the consumer can make an individual choice. What you have are stakeholders in the business that will naturally be conservative about making bets on new technologies and what have you. So for me, I'm not necessarily sure, I'm not calling any of these items flops, but I'm just saying that just because you have an API, it's not a silver bullet for all your integration problems. Just because ChatGPT becomes available, like RPA 10 years ago, it doesn't mean that's going to be a panacea for all your ills, but certainly I think they will find their place. Similarly, if I just turn my mind back to things like machine learning and bring us back to a point we made earlier on, we have some of the cleanest data that the organization holds, right? And that data can be analyzed and put through different machine learning algorithms to find out all sorts of things. Like some simple examples that organizations are obliged to disclose, for example, pay gap reporting, biases in pay. These kind of things can be surfaced quite quickly. And again, payroll data being very, very clean, it lends itself to that. But at the same time, kind of pulling against those applications of machine learning, you have things like GDPR and automated decisioning around data based on technologies like machine learning. So again, the organization will say, I like the sound of machine learning and how it can help us, but your data protection officer would probably say, well, let's just look that over and see the consequences on employees of decisioning that may be based on automated tools like AI and machine learning. So definitely they'll find a place, but we'll have to find a place that balances the ethics of machine learning with the innovation and the insight that it can give us. So look, they will absolutely find a place, but it might not necessarily be as ubiquitous as quickly as we think.
It all takes time, yeah, sure. Especially in payroll, obviously, as you said before, you can't afford to make errors, right? So, where in other spaces, maybe the adoption is something that people are more willing to experiment with new things. In payroll, we know that generally we need to be quite certain that it will not break things. Now talking about not breaking things. Well, that's actually one of the themes that, one of the kind of topics that's come up in a lot of our recent conversations is this, I suppose, sort of prevailing mindset in payroll. If it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? And I wonder if you've encountered that a lot, and what's your take on that?
I suppose I have a take, and I'll get to the take in a moment. Um, but before we get there, we need to kind of understand what motivates it, right? So payroll is in this kind of dissatisfier space. You can only make people unhappy by getting it wrong, right? Like the benchmark is unreasonable. Like I expect my payroll to be right on time every time, right? So does every other employee, including people that work in payroll, right? They don't want to let anybody down. And we've seen how the payroll team has moved heaven and earth and been so agile during the pandemic to make sure the organization and employees were kept whole, right? So hats off without a doubt. But with that level of benchmark comes, I think, probably not extreme, but probably overwrought levels of conservatism about change, because let's not change anything, because what change brings is risk that something is going to go wrong, even if that change will bring big benefits to how we work in payroll and the kind of service we deliver into the organization. So, because the organization and every employee in the organization sets and expects that benchmark, it really, really constrains, I think, the appetite of the payroll team to change. So my take on this is it is broken and it's time to fix it, right? So that's my opening position, because if I think about how we want to work, right? If I think about the quality of work we do, if you think about getting up in the morning and saying, I'm really charged up and excited by the influence I can have in the organization today. And I can connect to that purpose because I'm no longer manually in this industry of spreadsheets, combining data, checking data all of the time. I know that's going to motivate a lot of people that I talk to in the payroll world. So when we think about that, maybe it is broke and it is time to fix it. And maybe there are opportunities to fix it. And I think then, because the payroll team have been, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe not in that kind of mindset to go and, address the challenges, to fight for a business case in the organization to make a change. There are lots of opportunities out there that will appeal to the organization to change, because the organization is all into agility. How can I do something better and faster? The organization is interested in performing more with less, which basically translates into saving time and money, right? The organization wants to pay down risks. They understand risk. They have risk management teams. So compliance risk, information security risk, key person risk. So I think if we move ourselves as an industry to a position where we say, okay, change is good. There's going to be maybe some short-term bumpiness that we can communicate out to the organization so we don't take a kick in. There are some big benefits to be had from it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very, very, very good points. So just to wrap things up then, I guess, we talked about a lot of the trends and changes in the industry. You and I obviously have been working in this space now together for the last number of years, and had our own journey, building a business like Payzaar, a technology-driven, payroll company. I think back to one of the episodes last year. We had actually Max van der Klis Bussink on the program interviewing me. So we kind of turned the host and the interview tables around. And one of the things that he asked me, which I thought was quite good question, is he asked me about my experience of building this business, and if I had the chance to go back in time, would I have done anything differently? And I did not say I would have looked for a different co-founder, so don't freak out. I think I had a much better answer. I don't remember what I said actually, but I think it's a very, very curious question. So I'm curious to hear your answer to that question. If you had the chance to go back, anything you would have done differently?
I'm sure there's lots of little things. There's lots of little things that I think we could have done differently. But I suppose what I have is I've kind of well, actually, it's a little bit to start a business. You need to be a little bit crazy, right? And when I say that, you need to be a little bit crazy. When you look at the statistics around business success and failure, so 1 in 10 businesses that start don't last a year, right? So you're automatically backing yourself to be in the 10% and not to be in the 90%, which probably defies logic a little bit. And compounding that then, of the 1 in 10 businesses that start, only 1 in 10 and succeed. Only 1 in 10 of those businesses are actually still in business 5 years later, right? So you have a 1% chance of success. So for me, I think you need to be a little bit crazy. And how that little bit crazy kind of manifests itself in me is an abject embrace of failure, that you need to experiment to succeed. Failure is part of the innovation process. And if I kind of look back at lots of small little things, I probably would change. But overall, like the whole innovation side of things would drive me to say, well, they're all learning experiences that we're now kind of going, well, we tried this, we tried that, we fold that back into our experience, we, improve what we're delivering to our customers. And it just makes us better, it makes us stronger, it makes us leaner, it makes us more agile. And for me, it's this learning opportunity. So would I change? I wouldn't change anything big, I don't think, except maybe the co-founder.
Good luck with that. We'll see how that works out for you. But no, very good, very good. Well, listen, this was great. I think we got a lot of ground covered throughout this discussion, including learning how you're bribing your way onto a little podcast program like this one. So we'll have to tighten up, I think, the internal governance and compliance processes is one of the lessons that I'm taking away personally from this interview. But no, actually, excellent conversation. Great to have you on the show, Trevor, and thanks for taking the time. That's it for today's episode. Hopefully you liked the program. If you did, then please make sure you subscribe to our channel, watch some of the future episodes as well, or go back and watch some of the past episodes. There's some great stuff in there. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of the day and see you all soon.